Hello and welcome to this ET Now special. I'm Nayantara Rai, working from home in New Delhi. Today, I have a very special guest. He's just become CII president, veteran banker Uday Kotak. Mr. Kotak, pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for giving us time right here on ET Now. The day you took over as the president of the CII, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he's going to look forward to your leadership from the industry's perspective on getting growth back. He's also spoken about how the private sector must take a step forward, and then the government will be taking 2 steps forward. Mr. Kotak, I would like to say at the outset, let's not get into the nitty-gritties and what the growth can be and all. Kal pata nahi kya hoga. Let's focus on how to make this decade India's decade, how to seize growth and make it India's decade. So, Mr. Kotak, with that, I'd like to ask you, what is the industry's plan of action? What is the step that the industry is going to take for which the government can then reciprocate with 2 steps?
Nayantara, first of all, I completely share with you the need for a very positive approach to a very challenging time. These are unique times, the kind of times we may not have ever seen in our lives. We are also aware about the fact that we are still grappling with the virus, the lack of a cure and a lack of a vaccine. Therefore, it is in this context that we need to keep our spirits up and think out of the box for a new era of potential opportunity going forward. And in that context, the Prime Minister addressing the CII annual session on its 125 years was a very, very positive step. And we were really enthused by the level of positivity the Prime Minister demonstrated, saying India will definitely grow. And that gives us the confidence of a positive spirit, purpose, and a little bit of animal spirit, which is very crucial at this point of time. And therefore, what do we need to do as we think going forward? When I look at our role and my role in that context, it's a very important role between what our industry members think about the future and what is it that we can do in our dialogue with government to move forward for India and, as you rightly said, make it India's decade. So we have come out with a point and an agenda plan, which you would have seen, which is a 10-point agenda. And I would really broadly divide the strategy into 2 parts. One, immediate. What do we need to do here and now? And second, what do we need to do in the medium term? So what is here and now is we need to focus on life and livelihood. And whatever it takes, including the spend, we must do it and not be as concerned what it does to our balance sheet, because it is about survival of human beings and about the nation at its essence. Therefore, here and now has to be focused on life and livelihood. The medium term, which is where India can make a big difference, has 4 parts to it in terms of the growth. One is investment, consumption, net exports, and government spending. The government has been doing its bit by spending. For example, the fiscal deficit would have expanded this year on a consolidated basis by at least 5 percentage points further, which is about 10 lakh crores. And government may have to do more for the here and now things additionally. So that is, and government spending has been the biggest engine for our growth last few years. So now the time has come for number 1, which is private investment. Yeah. And it has been sluggish for last 5 or 6 years. Indian business and industry has been risk averse. And there have been reasons for that, which they would explain. But one of the important reasons also is that the way we have been doing business in India has fundamentally changed. Therefore, a little bit of what I call as cleansing of Indian business and industry has happened. It has had its fatalities in the bargain and has created some shock with other businessmen. We in India used to deal in a particular manner of doing business for the last 50 years. That has fundamentally changed. It's a different world, and it's a world where at some level I relate to it because it's a world about transparency, about better governance of corporate India, and cleaner practices. So that is a good thing. But it also comes thereafter with much more responsibility for business in terms of how it conducts itself. And here, therefore, private investment is going to be the big opportunity. Historically, for example, Indian promoters like to have a very large percentage ownership of their ventures. Time has now come for them to partner investors domestically and globally and say, at this point of time, I need to grow my business, not own more and remain small.
Right.
Or do, in the past, as some of them did, funny stuff to have a higher ownership. That's over.
Okay.
The time has come. We must grow more. We must be ready to say, we want risk investors to come alongside with us, domestic or international, but grow the size of the cake. And I want that risk-taking to come back, even if it means lower equity ownership.
And we've already started seeing that happen, right, Mr. Kotak, which would also show that India's hot when it comes to capital raising. Look what Reliance Jio is doing, HDFC, your own bank, Bharti Airtel. There may be the blue chips, but are you seeing that it exists at the moment? Money is coming into India, which is also something we need to talk about and celebrate.
Absolutely. And this is where I want to make two important points for the discussion. Think about each business as a boat in high seas. Okay, we are navigating in high seas. There's a huge thunderstorm and a cyclone in the middle of the seas. And each of the businesses are in their boats, some of them bigger, some of them smaller. First job is to navigate your boat well. Second job is, when you start seeing the shore on the other side, to see that there is a big opportunity on the other side of the shore. Not all boats will reach the other side. But the boats who will navigate well and survive will have an opportunity on the other side of the shore. And if you take this example, having a stronger capital base and navigating your boat well through the storm for opportunity on the other side is the key to the future. And therefore, my strong advice to my fellow colleagues in corporate India, including in banks and NBFCs, is the markets are giving you an opportunity. Go out and raise your capital and do not nickel and dime on the price.
Do not nickel and dime on the price. And in fact, that's something we've seen in the last week, 10 days, to be fair, when it comes to the big boys, at least. But Mr. Kotak, because you brought up capital bases and markets, I have to ask you this one question. Look at what's happening on ground, whether it's in India or in the United States, whether it is social unrest or the economy. What is happening with the markets, the bull run that we are seeing, whether it is coming to the small caps or the large caps? Can you make sense of it at all?
Here is my hypothesis. The markets are making a judgment about the future.
Okay.
And most of us in the real world economy are looking at the present. Okay. And the present is dire. Present is, lockdown, supply chain problems, containment zones, red zones, orange zones, green zones, all the issues which we are looking at today, which is what you report on a day-to-day basis. Marketplace is saying something which is different. It may be right, it may be wrong. But what is the hypothesis of the market? And I think it's important for us to spend a minute or two on that. The market is saying, and you talk to investors and analysts, which is what I have been doing in recent times. The core of the message is, for earnings of companies, the analysts are saying 2020-21 is a washout. We are less concerned about 2020-21. We are looking at earnings of companies in 2022 and 2023. And we are making our assessment and estimates of that and basis which we are buying today.
Right.
Now, apply the same principle to our GDP. Okay. Just as there is an individual stock, think about India as a stock and look at our GDP. We know this year's GDP is under pressure, maybe even negative. but think like investors and analysts. What are we doing as a country in terms of our policy and decisions? That medium-term GDP, that is 2022 and 23, gets back to higher trend growth.
Right.
If we get that right, the stock called India will do well. And if we do not get that right, the stock called India will find it tough.
Because we must become an outperformer. We can't remain an underperformer.
Absolutely. Therefore, we have to think the future.
Yeah. And we were just getting on that trajectory. But, Mr. Kotak, just picking up from that point as well, when you make this clarion call to your colleagues in industry, including banks and NBFCs, to look at the capital base, to look at raising capital. And as of now, the first few days, it does look like there is appetite for Indian companies. Mr. Kotak, the lion's share is also held by publicly held banks. They are the lion's share when it comes to India, when it comes to credit offtake, when it comes to their responsibility to make sure there is financial inclusion and livelihoods are not wiped out. And there the government must also play a very big role.
Absolutely. And on that, I think there is going to be a significant capital requirement, I think, in Indian banking sector as well. And if you look at the loan book of Indian banks, it's about 100 lakh crores. Out of the 100 lakh crores, let us take a hypothetical situation where about 4 to 5 lakh crores is the loan losses for the banking system out of the COVID pandemic, which is 4 to 5%. Okay, that is 4 to 5 lakh crores of losses. Capital of Indian banking is 11 to 12 lakh crores. And there is some mark-to-market gain on bonds, which will help the loss of 4 to 5 lakh crores. But there is still going to be a significant shortfall in capital situations for banks. So whether it's public sector banks, where government will have to think about ways of recapitalizing them, or private sector banks, capital is going to be the most important item on the balance sheet. And in times like this, the balance sheet is more important than the profit and loss account.
Okay. So that's what you're saying. Look at the size of the balance sheet. Don't get into the bottom line. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying the priority has to be a strong balance sheet.
Look, okay, so you have to have a strong balance sheet. But then the other question then, Mr. Kotak, is that where is this money going to come from? Yes, we've had previous crises in the past. But this time around, if there's something different, it is the forex reserves that are there with the Reserve Bank of India.
Yes.
Is it time that we utilize them, that should be the Brahmastra fired by the RBI?
First of all, the good news is our external account is in great shape. We are not going to have a current account deficit this year. Oil is at least so far looking like under control, though it's back to around 40, but it's not too high. And we therefore have a very good external situation. What we need to think about is in terms of where is the money going to come from. I am reminded of Ben Bernanke's statement in 2008 that we will create helicopter money and distribute money from the helicopter.
Yeah.
This time, central banks around the world are no longer saying helicopter money. They are saying airplane loads of money.
Yeah.
Okay. So whether it is the US, whether it's the ECB, where Angela Merkel and Christine Lagarde are both talking the same tune, we will do whatever it takes and print whatever money is required for Europe. And then you have China. China is creating huge liquidity. And India, through the RBI, has created very positive liquidity situation and dropped short-term interest rates. So a lot of liquidity is available out there in the marketplace. Therefore, this time around, I don't think it's about availability of money. It's about the quality of India's GDP, India's decisions now, which will sustain us over the next few years, and how well our companies perform in these times.
We should never confuse insolvency with a liquidity problem. Earlier, it was a corporate governance problem. Yeah. Even you have this ample liquidity, and I think despite RBI's excellent efforts, the problem is the liquidity is not percolating down. It is getting stuck at the AA rated NBFC, the AA rated stocks and all of that. And that is going to create a problem even for the SMEs and the MSMEs. And here the Modi government is trying to come out with a credit guarantee scheme. But my question to you, Mr. Kotak, is that in today's day and age, which brave heart is going to go out and say, "Mujhe ek loan chahiye"?
Nayantara, I must first share the good news. The MSME scheme with the corporate guarantee given by the government will work well. And it is open up to October. I think by September, October, most of the money should get used. Okay. So that is 3 lakh crores, which will be given out by banks to MSMEs between now and September, October. And therefore, that is actual lending which will happen on the ground. So I think that is a big plus and a very positively structured MSME corporate guarantee scheme. And I commend the government for that. So we are taking care of MSMEs through the government guarantee scheme. As far as the rest of the borrowers are concerned, there are 2 categories. Categories where banks want to lend, but those borrowers are saying there's a lockdown, our requirements have dropped, we don't need them. So banks are not risk averse, the borrowers are.
Okay.
Okay.
You're putting the ball in their court, saying they're the ones who don't want loans. You're ready to.
We are ready to give them because we think they are a good credit and we think they can sustain the crisis.
Okay.
And there is a second category where borrowers want the money, but we don't think they may be credit worthy. So we can't give them money because finally we owe money to the depositors. And in that context, I want to add one other point, this moratorium and this PIL. I believe that the depositor's money in a bank is sacred. And the primary responsibility of the bank is to protect the trust and confidence of its depositors. And therefore, depositors' money has to be paid both the principal and the interest. We cannot have a situation where we have a borrower who has been given a moratorium, therefore more time, which he has chosen. And then say that I should not be charged interest. It is like almost like a depositor being told that, listen, your money is with the bank, but bank will not pay you interest. It is not possible. It's the wrong thing to do. And we must ensure that the integrity and the discipline of the financial market and the sector is protected.
You know, one of the most heartening statements you've said over right now also is the banks are willing to give credit to those who deserve credit. Obviously, that is an important caveat there. Because one of the biggest fears also has been that as we come out of the lockdown, delinquencies will be on the rise, right?
Yeah.
Livelihoods are going to be wiped out. You're seeing the largest migration since 1947. It's a reverse migration, but it's also the largest migration you're seeing since 1947. There is not enough demand to have the factories open, even if you have the labor over there. But the very fact that you're saying that banks are willing to lend, because without that, you can't have an economy going. But there's such a big problem. How do you fix it? It can't only be done by lending, right? You need to create.
Of course, which is why one is lending. Secondly is corporates getting their balance sheet equity stronger. Third is on this migration issue. Okay. And I think it's a very important point you've raised. This rural-urban rebalancing is a must for India's future.
And not only is it needed at the moment, it's where the opportunity probably lies at the moment. Are you seeing your industry peers realize that? The Prime Minister, for example, said, my advice to you is go in for rural development, go in for agriculture, go into rural India. But are you aware of corporates maybe reworking their plans, reimagining their business models?
I am quite hopeful that in the next 6 to 12 months, we will see the green shoots of the private investment cycle.
Okay. 6 months green shoots we're going to see.
6 months to 12 months green shoots on private investment cycle.
And that we've not seen for years, Mr. Kota.
Yeah, but it's always like you drive with the car and the windshield in front. Don't look at the rear view mirror.
Okay.
And don't be surprised. You're surprised by the markets.
Yes, I am.
This also could be the next big surprise. But give it 6 months to a year.
But for that to happen, now let me ask you this question. For that to happen, for the animal spirits which you in your first answer said have been slightly unleashed. You didn't say they're fully unleashed. What's it going to take for that? In the absence of a health vaccine, what's it going to take for that?
First of all, certainly greater comfort with the virus is absolutely essential over the next 6 to 12 months about where we are going. Is this a health issue primarily?
Yeah.
Second, in addition to that, I think we are seeing the government stand by and give a very strong message that we are with you, business and industry. And I've seen the positivity of the government led by the Prime Minister which is a very different tone, talk, and body language. And I'm very enthused by it. And that is also supported by the fact that there is a growing realization that we need to build an Atmanirbhar Bharat. And for me, Atmanirbhar Bharat is a strong and a self-reliant India, which is competitive and engaged with the world.
Okay. So as we move towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have already started, trying to take steps to make sure that we become the preferred destination for manufacturing. Mr. Kotak, can you tell me, and we do know that more stimulus measures, right, will come out from the government. They've been quite clear and categorical on that and comforting in that sense. What is needed the most? Some of the immediate steps that the government and the RBI need to take.
I think one, from the government point of view, as I said, the immediate steps really have to be lives and livelihood, okay? And giving a fair safety net to people who lose their jobs. I think that is very important. But I would talk medium term. Medium term, I would focus on investment in healthcare, in education, in Mother Nature. Look at the devastation by the virus, by the 2 cyclones, by the locust attacks. We need harmonization. We need to have sustainability in what we do. And we really need to get our net exports back. We need to encourage exports. Yeah. Exports have been a self-reliant India is not only about reducing imports, which is important for net exports, but we also need to increase our exports. So these are some of the points. And I genuinely believe for India's sustainable future, growth is a non-negotiable way forward.
It's nice to hear that growth has to be non-negotiable. It must come at all possible ways. Mr. Kotak, I want to ask you one question, though. Someone that everybody respects so much. Now, there has been one trend in the last 1 month, and that is not just in India, but around the world. The rich have gotten richer. Look at the United States, $450 billion of wealth creation. Even in India, that has happened. The billionaires have only got richer. The poor have got poorer. Why do you think that is the case?
I think we really need to redefine our future. Therefore, one of the big things which has changed the world is digital, okay? And it's created a huge divide between the physical and the digital world, okay? And the domination of digital has changed the rules of the game. And as that changes, I think it's very important to think about the future of jobs. And a safety net and a social security for all Indians over time will be something where policy will move towards.
As I come to an end of this interview, Mr. Kotak, like I said, you're someone who's revered, who's looked up to a lot. For the small businessmen tuning in at the moment, for the young Indians, whether they're just getting out of college or in their first or second job, what would be your advice to them? Anything that you want to tell them to lift their morale? Because they must be so scared at the moment.
No, this is once in a century event. This is going to change the rules of the game of how business is done, how jobs are created, how life will be run. The young person, think about life differently. Don't think about the traditional way jobs go. Think about areas like medical, healthcare, education, climate change, rural opportunity. Go out there and think about opportunity differently from what your fathers and forefathers thought.
Yeah.
And I still recollect, Nayantara, as a child, I had the privilege of my grandfather. He was a 1906 born. And he was in the prime of his youth when the Great Depression hit. And the stories I've heard from him then had a very different tone and tonality to the life I was brought up in. And therefore, to the younger generation, this is certainly a shock. But there is life beyond it, just as my grandfather found. He lived through the Depression, but he saw the wonderful side of a future. And it's the same mindset which I would want every youngster to remember, that when things look tough, the tough get going.
And when the tough get going, Mr. Kotak, Ben Bernanke very famously said that this you can't even compare to the Great Depression. This is some other kind of a climate issue that is taking natural disaster, which almost that it's seeming like. And unlike the Great Depression, you are predicting a much faster recovery.
I would. The prediction on the recovery would depend on the health and the science. if I'm depending on science and health, that at least in the next 1 year, we'll get greater clarity on which way we are going. I'm assuming that. And I would say 1 year is a reasonable time. And I have great confidence in human and human creativity to find a solution, at least in the next 1 year. I don't expect miracles, but I am an optimist that the world will bounce back in a different manner than what we have seen. The rules of the game will change. Many businesses will go out of business. New businesses will come, but the world will move on. And youngsters have to think about their future differently from the way their father thought.
And in fact, this reminds me of a tweet of yours a few days ago when you actually said if China can be the manufacturer for the world, why can't India be the office for the world? What did that mean?
See, I am supporter of India taking a share from China's manufacturing base, certainly. But I also feel India can be the office. And when I use the word office, I'm using the office both front and back. And I'm using it in the sense that in the digital world or the virtual world, a job at Google can be with somebody in the US, somebody in a city in India, or somebody in a village in India, as long as he or she has the competence and the capability. And if a Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai can be who they are and what they are as Indian engineers, I have great confidence in Indians and India's ability to be the office of the world. So a Microsoft office is where Satya Nadella lives his life. Every Indian must be a part of that office which runs the world.
And on that very optimistic note, Mr. Kotak, I'm going to thank you for taking the time out to join us here on ET Now. It's a Zoom call. I hope when it's safer, we get to travel, and whether I meet you in Mumbai or in Delhi, but for the next 1 year, we look forward to your leadership to steer us out of this crisis.
Thank you very much, Nayantara, and all the best, and take care of yourself. Bye.